October 12, 1945, San Francisco Bay. The transport ship's engines cut to silence. 247 Japanese women stood on deck, watching the Golden Gate Bridge emerge through morning fog like a specter from another world. Their hands gripped the railing, knuckles white. They had been told what awaited them on American soil: brutality, humiliation, degradation worse than death. Instead, as tugboats guided them toward the dock, they saw something that made no sense. Clean uniforms laid out on tables, hot steam rising from field kitchens, American soldiers moving about with casual efficiency, not cruelty. If this story moved you, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what forgotten stories from history you'd like us to uncover next. These moments deserve to be remembered. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. When the Americans offered them fresh clothing, the women refused. 3 words whispered through their ranks in Japanese. Watashitachi wa fuketsu desu. We are unclean. Their hair, matted with months of grime and lice, marked them as unworthy in their own eyes. They would not accept dignity until someone helped wash away their shame. And in that refusal, in that moment of profound humiliation, something impossible happened. The enemy showed them kindness. It shattered everything they believed about the war, about America, about themselves. The Pacific War had ended 2 months earlier on August 15th, when Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over radios across the Japanese Empire, announcing the unthinkable: surrender. For these women scattered across military installations from Manila to Singapore, from Saipan to the Marshall Islands, the announcement did not bring relief. It brought terror. They had served as nurses, radio operators, clerks, translators, cipher technicians. They had been told repeatedly what the Americans did to captured women. The propaganda had been specific, graphic, designed to ensure they would choose death over capture. Some had been stationed on remote islands where supply lines had been cut weeks before the surrender. They survived on coconuts and whatever fish they could catch. Others have endured months of Allied bombing raids, huddling in concrete bunkers as the earth convulsed. Now they stood as prisoners of war, facing a fate they had been conditioned to fear more than death itself. Among them was Yoko Tanaka, 23 years old, formerly a communications typist at a Japanese naval base in Luzon. Her fingers, once swift across telegraph keys, now trembled constantly. Her hair, once her pride, glossy and carefully pinned, now hung in tangled clumps that moved with hidden life. She had not washed it properly in 4 months. None of them had. The transport ship that carried them across the Pacific offered only salt water for bathing. Fresh water was rationed strictly for drinking. The voyage took 17 days. 17 days of fear, of women huddled together in the cargo hold, sharing rumors about what awaited them. 17 days of shame as their bodies grew filthier, as the lice spread from woman to woman, as their dignity crumbled with each passing mile. As the gangway lowered, Yoko smelled something that made her stomach clench with sudden, painful longing. Bread. Fresh bread baking somewhere nearby. For women who had subsisted on watery rice gruel and dried fish, sometimes nothing at all for days, the aroma was almost unbearable. When was the last time she had eaten bread? Before the war, certainly, a lifetime ago. She descended the gangway on shaking legs, expecting at any moment to be struck to be cursed, to be herded like animals toward whatever horrors the Americans had prepared. Instead, an American officer with a clipboard checked names off a list, his voice firm but not harsh. Female soldiers in crisp uniforms, women wearing the same insignia as the men, directed them toward waiting buses with calm efficiency. No one shouted. No one raised a hand. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. These were the demons of propaganda. These were the monsters who had firebombed Tokyo, who had incinerated Hiroshima and Nagasaki with weapons beyond comprehension. Yet they looked like ordinary people, tired young men and women who seemed more interested in finishing their shift than in tormenting prisoners. The buses traveled for nearly an hour through a landscape that deepened their despair. San Francisco stood intact, gleaming, untouched by war. Buildings rose toward the sky, whole and clean. Cars filled the streets, their chrome catching sunlight. People walked on sidewalks carrying shopping bags, living normal lives. Children played in parks. A young girl on a bicycle waved at their bus, and Yoko pressed her forehead against the cool glass, fighting tears. Back home, Tokyo was ash. Her family's neighborhood had burned in the March firebombing raids. Her mother, her two younger sisters, her grandmother, all dead. The contrast between Japanese suffering and American abundance was crushing. How had they lost so completely to a nation that had never known real hardship on its own soil? Camp Stoneman appeared through the bus windows like something from a dream. Wooden barracks painted olive green, arranged in precise rows. Guard towers at intervals, but the soldiers manning them looked bored rather than menacing. Compared to the bombed-out shelters many had last slept in, the camp looked almost orderly, almost safe. The buses stopped. The women filed out, their wooden shoes clattering on pavement. Female American soldiers, WACs they were called, stood waiting. Professional, their expressions neutral, neither kind nor cruel. They directed the new arrivals toward a long building for processing. Name, rank, duty station, capture location. The questions came in halting Japanese through a translator, a Japanese-American woman who would not meet their eyes. Yoko gave her answers in a small voice, staring at the floor. She was prisoner number 0143. The number felt final, like a gravestone inscription. After processing came the announcement that made Yoko's heart stop. They would be taken to the delousing station. Medical examinations would be conducted. Clean clothes would be provided. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they triggered a wave of shame so intense that several women began to weep openly. This was the moment they had dreaded most. Not violence, not cruelty, but exposure. Their uncleanliness would be revealed to American eyes. In Japanese culture, cleanliness was not merely practical. It was spiritual, a matter of deep personal honor. To be dirty, lice-ridden, unkempt was to be less than human. And they had no choice. They could not refuse orders. They could only endure the humiliation of being seen in their degradation. The delousing building loomed, steam rising as humid air poured out. Yoko's hands shook. Inside, white tiles and harsh lights revealed rows of showers and bins for soiled clothes. 3 American nurses waited, calm and gentle. Through the translator, they explained the steps: undress, shower for delousing, wash, undergo exam, receive clean clothes. The words were straightforward, practical. But for the Japanese women, each instruction felt like a knife cutting away the last shreds of dignity. Yoko's throat tightened as she removed her jacket, her shirt, her undergarments. Around her, the other women did the same, their movements slow, their eyes downcast. Some were crying silently now, tears streaming down their faces. When Yoko loosened her hair from its filthy pins, clumps came away in her hands. The matted tangles fell past her shoulders, greasy and moving with life. She could see the insects crawling in the strands, could feel them on her scalp. The shame was suffocating. She wanted to disappear, to cease existing, rather than stand exposed in her degradation. The American nurses moved among them with a gentleness that seemed impossible. They did not recoil. They did not show disgust. Instead, they handed out towels, pointed toward the showers, spoke in soft voices that needed no translation. One nurse, young with red hair and freckles, met Yoko's eyes and smiled. It was a small smile, sympathetic, as if to say, "I understand this is hard." That small gesture of humanity nearly broke Yoko completely. Yoko stepped under a shower head. The water came out lukewarm at first, then grew hotter. Steam rose around her. She reached for the soap on the shelf, a thick white bar that smelled of something floral and clean. As she began to wash, the water at her feet turned gray with accumulated dirt. She scrubbed her skin until it turned pink and raw, but her hair remained a problem. The tangles were too severe. The lice were too deeply embedded. No amount of soap and water would fix this in a single shower. She stood under the stream, letting water run over her head, knowing it was not enough. Around her, the other women were having the same realization. Their hair was ruined. Months of neglect had created a condition that could not be undone with simple washing. When Yoko finally turned off the water and wrapped herself in the provided towel, she felt cleaner than she had in months. Yet the improvement was incomplete. Her hair still hung in awful clumps. She could still feel movement against her scalp. The shame had not washed away with the dirt. After drying off, the women moved to the examination area. American doctors waited with stethoscopes and blood pressure cuffs. They checked each woman systematically, looking for signs of tuberculosis, malnutrition, infection. The doctors were professional, their touch clinical, but not rough. When the doctor examined Yoko's hair, his expression grew serious. He called over one of the nurses and spoke in English. Through the translator, they explained that Yoko would need special treatment. The infestation was severe enough to require cutting her hair short and applying medicated powder. The news hit Yoko like a physical blow. In Japan, a woman's hair was her pride, her beauty, her identity. To cut it was to cut away part of herself. The doctor, seeing her distress, spoke gently through the translator. The infestation could spread if left untreated. It could lead to infection. Short hair would grow back healthier. His words made sense, but sense did not ease the pain of this final humiliation. Yoko was not alone. Of the 247 women, more than 200 had hair infestations severe enough to require cutting. As the realization spread through the group, a collective grief settled over them. They had already lost so much. Their homeland, their families, their freedom. Now they would lose even this small piece of dignity. After the examinations, the women were led to another room where stacks of clean clothing waited. American military surplus dyed plain gray, shirts, pants, underwear, socks, shoes. All clean, all neatly folded, all free of lice and filth. The WAC sergeant in charge gestured for the women to take their sizes and dress. but no one moved. The women stood in their towels, wet hair dripping onto the concrete floor, staring at the clean clothes as if they were cursed. The sergeant frowned, confused. She spoke to the translator, who turned to address the group. Why were they not getting dressed? What was wrong? Sachiko Tanaka, an older woman who had been a nursing supervisor, stepped forward. She was 41 years old, gray streaking her tangled hair. She had survived 3 years of service in field hospitals across the Pacific. She spoke in halting English, then repeated herself in Japanese for the benefit of the other women. The women refused the uniforms. "We cannot," Sachiko said. "We are unclean. To wear clean clothes with lice in our hair would dishonor them." The translator relayed this, leaving the sergeant baffled. She tried to explain the clothes were standard issue, easily replaced, but the women stood firm. Even Yoko nodded clean garments meant nothing if their hair remained filthy. Wrapped in towels, water pooling at their feet, they waited in uneasy silence. When the sergeant returned with a medical corps captain and a senior WAC officer, the prisoner's plea was clear. They would not dress until their hair was truly clean. Captain Helen Thomas studied the group. She was 34 years old, a veteran nurse who had served in field hospitals across North Africa and Europe. She had seen soldiers with frostbite, refugees with typhus, concentration camp survivors barely alive, but this was different. These were enemy combatants who had served the Imperial Japanese military. By all rights, they should be processed efficiently and moved to their barracks. Nothing more was required, yet they stood before her, not defiant or demanding, but ashamed, requesting not better treatment, but to be made clean enough to deserve basic clothing. Captain Thomas made a decision that would ripple through the camp. She turned to her staff and gave a series of quick orders. Bring all available medicated lice treatment. Set up stations with scissors, combs, and antipedicular powder. Call in off-duty nurses and WAC volunteers. They were going to treat these women's hair. All of them, today. Within an hour, the delousing facility had been transformed. 6 stations were set up, each with a chair, supplies, and an American woman ready to help. News had spread through the camp. Volunteers had appeared. Nurses, WEC clerks, even the wife of a colonel who lived on base. Captain Thomas addressed the Japanese women through the translator. "We understand your concern about cleanliness. We are going to help you. Each of you will have your hair treated properly. Some of you will need it cut short. Others may be able to keep more length after treatment. But we will not move forward until you feel you can accept clean clothes with honor. Is this acceptable?" Sachiko's eyes filled with tears. She bowed deeply. The women behind her followed, 247 bodies bending in unison. It was not what they had expected. Not from the enemy, not from anyone. They had prepared themselves for harshness, for efficiency, for being processed like cattle. Instead, these American women were offering them dignity. Yoko was directed to the 3rd station, where a young nurse named Sarah waited. Sarah was perhaps 25, blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform crisp and spotless. She smiled at Yoko and gestured to the chair. As Yoko sat, Sarah began to work through her hair with a fine-toothed comb, assessing the damage. Yoko sat rigid, mortified that this American woman had to touch her filthy hair, had to see the lice crawling through it. She wanted to apologize, but the words stuck in her throat. Sarah worked methodically, her touch gentle, despite the difficult task. She applied the medicated solution, working it through section by section. The smell was sharp and chemical, but not unpleasant. As she worked, Sarah hummed quietly, a tune Yoko did not recognize but found oddly soothing. After the treatment sat for the required time, Sarah began to rinse it out, using a pitcher of warm water. Then came the cutting. Sarah showed Yoko the scissors, miming the length she would need to remove. About 6 inches, leaving Yoko with hair just below her ears. It was not as short as Yoko had feared. She nodded her consent. The scissors made soft, snipping sounds. Dark clumps fell to the floor, carrying with them months of accumulated horror. With each cut, Yoko felt something lift. The weight of the tangled, infested hair. The shame it represented. When Sarah finished and held up a small mirror, Yoko barely recognized herself. Her hair, though short, was clean and neat. Her scalp was free of movement, free of the crawling sensation that had tormented her for months. Sarah applied one more treatment of powder to ensure all lice and eggs were dead. Then she did something that made Yoko's breath catch. She took a clean comb and gently styled the short hair, making it look presentable, even pretty in its own way. It was a small gesture, medically unnecessary, yet it acknowledged Yoko's dignity. Around the room, American nurses treated Japanese women with a tenderness that transcended nationality. Some prisoners cried, others sat stunned. A few managed faint smiles. The process lasted hours. By evening, all 247 women were clean for the first time in months, some with near-military cuts, others with a bit of hair left, but all transformed. When Captain Thomas returned to offer clean clothes, Sachiko stepped forward, dropped to her knees, and pressed her forehead to the floor in the deepest gesture of gratitude. The others followed. Moved, Thomas told them gently, "Please stand. Just take the clothes and rest." As the women walked to their barracks in gray uniforms, they carried an unsettling realization. The enemy had shown them more dignity in captivity than their own army had shown in service. That night Yoko lay awake, touching her freshly shorn hair, realizing the warnings about American cruelty had been lies meant to ensure they fought to the last. In the weeks that followed at Camp Stoneman, they received medical care, decent food, and humane treatment protections Japan had not extended to Allied POWs. The irony was obvious. Yoko wrote home, trying to explain how American nurses had washed and cut her hair with care her aunt would never believe. War had taught these women that the enemy was subhuman. Peace revealed something harder, that the enemy was human. Years later, Yoko remembered not the shame of delousing, but the nurse named Sarah, who hummed while she worked and treated her as if she mattered. That small kindness became a lasting reminder that even in war's ruins, humanity could survive. They crossed the Pacific expecting brutality. Instead, they found compassion enough to begin replacing fear with understanding.